Hi, everybody. My name is Taylor Wolf, and I really quickly just wanted to thank you for joining me on my presentation on the death penalty. So, first, I really just want you to imagine hearing about somebody who spent months, maybe even years, thinking about and making plans to viciously murder another human being. That sounds crazy, right? Like, it's definitely something that all of us would condemn. Murder alone is probably the most serious crime that a person can commit. And this type of premeditated murder, well, that's even more wicked and vile, right? So, what if I told you that the number one most premeditated murder is currently legal in half of the states that make up our country? Yes, the number one most premeditated murder is actually capital punishment, which you might also know as the death penalty. Now, if you're anything like me, one of the most moral principles that you can have is this basic respect for human life. And this principle still applies even when that life has committed a crime. And while this used to be my only reason for wanting to abolish the death penalty, I have researched more about the process and the detrimental effects that this punishment actually can have on these inmates and society as a whole. So, today, really quickly, I just want to talk to you a little bit about a few reasons the death penalty does more harm than good and should be abolished completely. And I want to do this by arguing the basic right to human life, the failure to deter crime, the execution of the innocent, and the annual expenses. And I'm hoping that you will join me in making this important change across the nation. So, just to give you a little bit of a background, if you're unfamiliar, capital punishment, also known as the death penalty, it's referring to when criminal offenders are being sentenced to death for the crimes that they have committed. And this is more than likely they've committed a murder. Um, it's currently legal in 25 states across the US, and the types of crimes that are punishable by death include murder, genocide, crimes against children like rape, molestation, and kidnapping, crimes against state, which includes espionage, treason, piracy, and also these war crimes and terrorism. And all of these are punishable by execution, and these executions happen by hanging, lethal injection, electrocution, lethal gas, and firing squad. So now that you have a little bit more of a basic understanding, the first thing I want to talk to you is this right to human life. And this right to human life is probably our most important and most basic right that we have. And you would think that it should be protected at all costs, right? The United Nations actually has a universal declaration of human rights, and it includes this right to life, and it includes that nobody should be subjected to cruel and unusual punishment. And I really feel like that we live in a society that is progressing and is demanding this respect for every life, especially recently. And this punishment by death is probably the most violent disrespect on human life and violation of our most basic right. So it really makes you wonder, why are we still allowing the endorsement of taking lives as a means to an end? And this actually brings me to my next point, which is the failure to deter crime. So many people think that capital punishment benefits society by deterring crime across the country. This, however, has not been found to be true. There is no unique correlation between the legality of capital punishment and reduced crime rate. They've actually found that lower crime rates have been a product of lower unemployment rates and an increased police presence within communities. But as of right now, no studies have proven or disproven this link between the death penalty and the crime rates. This now leads me to my next topic, which is the execution of the innocent. Now, the death penalty, once execution has taken place, is clearly an irreversible act, right? Like, you can't bring this person back from the dead. And since 1973, over 150 inmates who were on death row were released because new evidence had surfaced within their trial and they were found innocent. They were found wrongfully convicted. And this is really a product of our flawed justice system. And this flawed system, is the reasoning behind these wrongful convictions, and it includes this inadequate legal representation. It includes racial prejudice. More blacks and people of color were found to be subjected to the death penalty than those who were not. Perjured testimony and this community and political pressure to solve the case. So this now leads me to my fourth and final reason for the abolition of the death penalty that I'd like to speak on. And it's particularly important because it affects all of us personally. And that is the annual expense of holding an inmate on death row. So, on average, a death row inmate costs $1.12 million more per year than an inmate sentenced to life in prison. So, in January of 2020, there were 2,620 inmates on death row. So, if you do the math, that's $3 billion total in additional expenses per year to house these death row inmates. And you should be asking the question, where does this money come from to pay for these expenses? And it comes from the taxpayer. It comes from you and me. And that should bother you because these resources, these financial resources, could be going towards other more important and pressing social issues that our country is currently dealing with. So you might be thinking, well, how can we fix this? What is an alternative? And the alternative to the death penalty is being sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. And I personally think that that's more of a punishment than being put to death is. I mean, you're forced to sit there with your own thoughts, thinking about what you've done until the day you die in some cold cell. That's definitely more of a punishment. But it also preserves the right to life. It protects the wrongfully convicted from execution and allows these resources to be distributed amongst more important social issues. So, really quick, capital punishment's disadvantages outweigh the benefits, if any. Honestly, I don't see any. And I've only mentioned 4 reasons, but if you really do even more research, there are plenty more reasons why the death penalty and this capital punishment should be abolished across the United States. Now, I only mentioned that it violates the right to human life. It fails to produce crime deterrence. It's an irreversible execution of the innocent, and it's a financial burden to put on the taxpayers. So a feasible and a practical alternative that we can use is this life sentence without parole when it comes to punishing a capital crime. Now, I really hope that you got something out of this presentation. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I really can't wait to hear what your thoughts are. Thanks, guys.